Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a great weekend. I know we had to shelter in place and people celebrated various religious festivities like Passover and Easter. I had a great, very socially distanced Easter myself. We had a cookout for immediate family members pretty much only. And we had about 10, maybe 12 people kind of scattered throughout, and enough food as usual to feed probably 100 people. But so I'll be eating leftovers for a while now. But I hope you had a joyous Easter as best you could under the circumstances. We need to rise, though, don't we? Like he has risen, we need to rise up as a nation. And we got some stories that kind of go along with that theme. First one today is President Trump. Does he have a roadmap to recovery? Some people say he doesn't. Some say he does. And we're going to give you my little take on that in just a moment. And then kind of an update on a story we've been following the last couple of weeks. And it has to do with our energy sector. Apparently, OPEC and other energy providers, including the United States, Russia, and Mexico, have come to a deal to limit the amount of production and keep prices a little bit higher. So we'll talk about that, prices of a barrel of oil, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But apparently Biden now, since Bernie has dropped out, he has a to-do list. And this article wants to talk about what Biden needs to be doing over the coming weeks and months. So we'll get into that. But we start with an article from Politico. White House still has no roadmap for restarting the economy, according to Politico. With the White House moving to reopen the economy as early as May 1st, top officials have yet to coalesce around a single plan to allow Americans and businesses to safely resume work on coronavirus pandemic rages on. Well, let me tell you, they're not going to find, it says here coalesce around a single plan. There is not going to be a single plan. It's not possible. Everybody, to a certain extent, even the researchers, are winging it to this point. Do you realize that? We have never, certainly in modern times, with the modern media, with everybody able to get information at the touch of a finger, even though it may or may not be accurate information, they can still get it. With everybody being able to socially distance and stay connected online and all of that stuff, there is not going to be a single cohesive plan. There never will be. There never will be. At some point, and I'll probably make this point multiple times during the show today, at some point, we as individuals, as American citizens, we are going to have to assess our own risk. We're not going to be able to simply wait for some master plan, some, pie in the sky thing when all is clear and we're under no threat whatsoever. If we all went, I hate to break this to you, snowflakes, but if we all went back to work over the next couple of weeks, let's say May 1st actually is a date. And by the way, it is dates that President hopes for. And we're going to talk about hope in just a moment. But if we all go back to work, say tomorrow, you know what the most dangerous thing that we're going to be doing the day we go back to work? It isn't the coronavirus. It's driving to work. More of us will be killed on the first day going back to work. Probably within the first month, more people will probably be killed because they're running all over trying to figure out what to do and not paying much attention and worried whether they got the mask adjusted right. I would predict, and I hope I'm wrong, that more people over the next 2 months, if we go back to work and get moving, probably be killed on the highway than the entire coronavirus together. So, I mean, it's just crazy when you really start. When you get some perspective, what we're doing right now is a bit nuts. Instead, senior administration officials, talking about the White House, are engaged in an earnest yet scattershot effort to support Donald Trump's long expressed desire to revive the downward spiraling economy and stabilize the volatile markets in the middle of an election year. Well, shame on him. Shame on President Trump. By all means, impeach 45. I mean, for God's sakes, the man is only trying to do what's in the best interest of the American people. So if for that, he absolutely should be impeached. I mean, he's trying to put the needs of the country ahead of his own electability. Let's say he says we can go back to work on May 1st and it makes the virus double. Who's going to pay the highest price for that? Of course, people who die, certainly. But President Trump would probably not get reelected if that actually happens. So at some point, it's a risk. It just is. Life is a risk, man. As there's a book out there that, more people need to probably read. It's been around a day or two. It basically says something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, taking a little bit of political license, I guess, or poetic license, however you want to say it, creative license. It says something about the only kind of thing that's really guaranteed is death and taxes. I mean, really? I mean, we're guaranteed to die once we're born, and we're pretty much guaranteed to pay taxes, at least some of us, man. But think about this. 22,000 babies. It's going up. It might be by the end of this day, 23,000 deaths in the United States attributed to corona. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, as we're finding out, that they actually died of corona. It could be they were dying of cancer and they went ahead and died. If they positive, it's corona. It doesn't matter what you could walk out in front of a bus in New York City if there's any moving, and if you're tested positive for COVID-19, that's going to be your cause of death. That just seems to be. But realistically, 114,000 worldwide up to this point. Now, everybody's life is precious. Unlike some of the Democrats, I believe all life is precious. Even those that are just born, and we're talking about making them comfortable before we whack their little heads. I actually believe in their lives too. But 114,000, now we know that China's numbers are a bit fraudulent. We'll probably get into that more in just a moment. But perspective, please, somebody. The ever-evolving discussions inside the White House about when and how to relax the administration's guidelines on social distancing are happening against the backdrop of a rising death toll in the United States. Well, the death toll continues to rise. If it's one more, it has risen, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. But if you look at it, if the statistics are to be believed, we're flattening the curve in some places. I had a friend of mine, and I love the guy, but he pretty liberally posted up, about if President Trump, I wonder if he's going to donate hotel beds of his that he owns for hospital beds. And I had to remind the guy, I quit kind of chiming in on liberals because it just really don't serve a point. I do my show. If you want to know how I feel, just watch the show. But sometimes I fall back, I digress, degress, regress, whatever. And I couldn't help but post on my friend's timeline and remind him that, right now, Washington State, they built a multi-hundreds, maybe in thousand, I can't remember, bed hospital out there where the Seahawks play. And you know how many patients actually used it? Zero. Now, I don't know if that's a bird whistle or whatever. It's still zero. And they tore it down. The ship that's parked in New York Harbor has been way underutilized. And New York City is actually giving back ventilators and giving them to other people. So this idea that President Trump hasn't stepped up to the plate is a bunch of malarkey, as old Joe Biden used to say. And about a social distancing deal, one of the things that's going to come out of this whole deal is we're going to be social distancing for a while. In fact, Dr. Fauci said, and we talked about this a little bit on Friday, about the handshake may be gone forever. People are going to naturally social distance. We don't need any more government orders about social distance. If people don't know right now that we need to step back a little bit, then they never will. Okay, so, you can have all the orders and whatever. The American people get it by and large right now. And as I said, Dr. Fauci said that handshaking may be gone forever. By the way, if you want to look at our podcast, the best way to do it is to go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. We appreciate that. You can also see us on our YouTube channel. Spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. It'll pop up. Our shows are on there and doing well. We need more views on that. We're getting a lot of views on Facebook, and I appreciate it greatly, but we need more views on YouTube. So check it out there, share it with your friends, because that'll help us in supporting the show. I got to make a statement in case you've been watching America's Voice News, not on the Facebook site, but on the network site. Apparently, they've been having some problems with some audio on, I know we've had intermittent problems, but I'm talking about complete audio. And so they had to rearrange and take down some of my shows. We are trying to address that literally as we speak. So if you've gone there trying to find an archive show, you'll see some in the past, but for about the last week, they had to take some of them down because there were some audio issues. So we're trying to address that. Please be patient in this time of, uncertainty and everything else. Every network, even the major networks, are having a little issues, and we're having a few as well. I hope you aren't, but I imagine you are. President Trump said Friday, I will say this is President Trump's words. I want to get it open, talking about the economy, as soon as we can. We have to get our country open. And here's the deal. I got to break that habit. I'm starting to get the Joe Biden, here's the deal. But I'm a little more coherent than Joe. But let me get back to the thing here. Hope. Hope has become apparently a dirty word. I mean, we just came off of Easter and Passover, which is, those two holidays are really all about hope. All about, I mean, if you look at the core of it, it's all about hope. But hope, the president trying to give us hope, he keeps being, the mainstream media keep trying to make him out to be some kind of villain. There's nothing that he can do really about it. But they make it, at least you can watch JMT, shows like this, and get the unvarnished truth. I hadn't said that word, the unvarnished truth, like scrubbing away all that nasty mess till you get to the hardwood truth here. That's one of the things you get here on John Martin Talks. But they've insinuated that the president has set some in stone dates. He has not done that one single time. Not Easter, not May 1st. He's been saying he hopes we can get there. And what is wrong with that? Impeach 45 for hope? I would say not. But hope, man, I decided I would look it up coming off the Easter and Passover holidays this weekend. What does the term hope mean, and how do I think it applies to President Trump here? And this, it's kind of one of the secondary definitions, but I think it is the key to understanding the media's reaction to Donald Trump. Hope, a feeling of trust. A feeling of trust. That is what the mainstream media does not want you to have about President Trump. They do not want you to have a feeling of trust. So anything that would be building trust with the President of the United States, in this case, Donald Trump, the mainstream media, the Democrats, Joe Biden, the progressive leftists, the never-Trumpers, mix them all together. That's what they cannot have happen. They do not want you to have hope. In this definition, a feeling of trust with anything that has to do with Donald Trump. They are trying to destroy trust. Now, am I saying that the mainstream media wants people to die? No, but they dadgum sure want to take advantage of it because they want to destroy your hope, your potential trust in President Trump. They need to destroy it because if people actually have hope and built a feeling of trust with President Trump, he will win in that landslide all of y'all are projecting. When asked which metrics he would use to make his decision, he pointed to his head, talking about his brain over there. Yeah, he said this. The metrics right here, boy, they hate this part. The metrics right here, that's my metric. That's all I can do. And they hate him for that. I mean, absolutely, unadulterated hate. They loathe the man for that very statement and more like it. That Donald Trump would somehow look you in the eye. You don't have to agree with him, by the way. That's not what this is about. But to look you in and say, look, I got this. I got a good idea what we need to do. It's in my head. It's in my heart. And I'm going to do what I think is right for the American people. That's what President Trump is trying to say. But he's trying to give us hope. What do they want him to do? Come out and go, we're all going to die. And we are someday. And some will die today. Some from COVID and some not. I've been thinking about it over the weekend. I had a little time on my hands, so I'm trying to come up. Maybe you could help me with this. Chime in on Facebook, because apparently everybody's staying home. And, it's like my old daddy used to say when a big family would come in a restaurant, he'd say, "Oh, they must have lived by the railroad track." People go, "What do you mean by that?" Well, they got woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Ain't nothing else to do. But so if you're socially distanced from everybody else and you're in your house, it could be some babies. So I've been kind of coming up with some names because you know for a fact that somebody's gonna name their baby Coronisha. There is no doubt about that. And I'm equally opportunity. So if that offends you, you're welcome. Because I'm an equal opportunity offender here. I'm not politically correct. Don't pretend to be, have no desire to be. And if that gets me kicked off or whatever, so be it. But that ain't me. But somebody's going to name a Coronisha. I started calling my little dog that affectionately, Coronisha. And somebody's going to name their kid Covidia or Virola. And maybe for a guy, they might name him Covis. I'm just trying to come up with some names. You think we got to laugh or cry, man. Crying, except for tears of joy, is kind of useless, right? But back to what I said earlier. At some point, regardless of what the president does or doesn't do, we as individuals, as American citizens, and we used to be capable of this, we're becoming less and less all the time, apparently, but we have to weigh our own risk. You have to weigh the risk for your family and everything. Are you just going to sit back and wait for somebody to tell you it's okay to peek your head out from under the rock? If that's the case, man, I was thinking about it on the way in here, about scientists. They talk about the science, and I'm all for science. But I'm thinking about NASA and how, it's all about science. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, if there wasn't a John Glenn, if there wasn't a Neil Armstrong, if there wasn't what was his name, Chuck, I'm trying to think of the guy, never was an astronaut, but was a great test pilot, Chuck Yeager. If it wasn't for those guys, it wouldn't have mattered what the scientists did because they never would have gone anywhere. They might have put a chimp in space and that would have been about it. But they never would have that man would have, if it would have been totally up to science. I'm going to say this flat out. And this is my opinionated fact, but I believe it's a fact nonetheless. I don't believe we ever would have put a man on the moon if it were left totally up to scientists. I'm not saying we wouldn't have went to the moon. There'd have been an unmanned probe and all that kind of stuff, a robot maybe. But the scientists would have never put a man on the moon if it wasn't for John Glenn willing to ride that crotch rocket, man, and just be up there daredeviling it. If it wasn't for Neil Armstrong and all the other brave men and now women who have been to space, we wouldn't be there. So I say all that to say this. At some point, we have to grow a pair, so to speak, or at least pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, which Ocasio-Cortez says you can't do. All that kind of stuff. Of course, if you tried to grow a pair and don't have a pair, the Democrats probably snip it off anyway. But at some point, and I don't mean to be all this serious in the morning or in the evening, depending on when you're watching it, but at some point, ladies and gentlemen, we have to take a risk and assess our own risk individually. Even as great as President Trump is doing, and I believe he's doing a great job. Perfect? No, but a great job. Without taking our own risk, man, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. It's something you're going to hear from me a lot because it really troubles me how we're caving in our society. When I look at the giants that we grew up with, all the way back to our founding fathers and even our own parents, if you're my age especially. I don't know about me, but my parents, they were giants. There's no question about that. Are there statues to them? Well, my dad probably, but not necessarily my mom, who might have been the biggest giant of all. I mean, anyway, it just gets me how we're so cowering in the corner. Not all of us, but you know what really gets me or pisses me off? That we're given the message to hide in the corner. We got to come out fighting at some time, or we're going to lose it all. If we don't man the political ramparts, we're going to man the real ones again. Trust me on that. It's coming. Like the majority of policy decisions within the White House, the necessant moves, kind of clumsy moves, I guess, to restart the economy have been plagued by different factions of staffers vying for the power or simply not communicating with one another. Well, that may or may not be true. Some aspects of it are true, but the media is all about doomsday. Every single question they ask the president at these press briefings and everything, most of them are repetitive as heck. They ask the same one every day. But they'll ask, and I heard one about Jim Acosta clip coming into work this morning. Yes, I'm consider this coming into work. It's a happy, joyous, and free work, but it's work nonetheless. But Acosta was asking the president, I think on Friday, and I was listening to a replay of it, that, about all these things that aren't available, hospital beds, man. And the president actually told him, I don't know who you're listening to. And he says, he gave him a few examples. And the greatest thing, I should have picked up the recording, but Acosta said, but the doctors that are coming on our show, talking about CNN, are reporting, and President Trump gave him a great line. You want to know why President Trump lets people like Acosta come in back in there? It's this line that President delivered. He says, well, that's because if they said anything else, if they said any positive news, you wouldn't let them on your network. I mean, and I'm paraphrasing, but check that out. It's pretty cool. Some officials are looking at data from states to make their recommendations, while economic officials are weighing moves to change tax policy to boost growth once again. Now, tax policy. I got to bring this to you. Sorry about it. My headphones aren't quite adjusted right. I got to get them right. There we go. Some little things irritate you sometimes. But Governor Cuomo, I don't know if you've been paying attention to his press briefings. They're on every day as well. He said something about repealing the SALT tax. If you don't know what that is, and when the president passed the tax bill a year or so ago now, he had in that bill that you do away with the federal deductions for state and local taxes like New York. And of course, Cuomo and states, high tax states like New York, they want to do away with this all the way. The reason why the SALT tax, they hate it so much, just keep this in mind, what it effectively does, and if you're in one of those states that pays high income tax, I get it. I understand why you don't particularly like it, because it costs you more money. But the reality of it is, it makes the people, in this case Cuomo, responsible for their own tax policies. Because before they could raise taxes and you put it all on the federal government because you wrote it off. Florida doesn't have a state income tax. You might ought to try it up there in New York. It works pretty well for us here. By the way, if you're moving down here or sheltering down here, don't bring your tax policy with you because we're quite happy with no sales tax. But said one Republican, and of course this Republican was anonymous, excuse me. Sorry about that. It's I'm drinking in the morning, but I'm John Martin, not Dean Martin, so you figure that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. But I get a kick out of it. Everybody's got to be anonymous. One thing about me, I'm not anonymous. I'm John Martin Talks, so some of you might wish I'd shut up, but I don't. If based off of data or metrics, this is what this anonymous Republican said, some type of threshold, then the White House will have to put that out there and start building a case because the president has said he will do it in a way that is safe. And he's going to do it in a way that is safe as possible. Still got to take, there's going to be risk. There just is. If he lays, talking about the president, if he lays out I'm sorry, this is hard to read. If he lays out the case, then I think he will have the public with him. If he just does it by his gut, that is where he will be beaten up politically. In the absence of that roadmap, there will be a lot of political criticism. Man, that was a mouthful. The President Trump, I'm not saying he's always right, but when you look at what he's been saying as he came down that escalator, Citizen Trump, then Candidate Trump, then now President Trump, he's been right about most everything. He's probably been right about some things he wasn't too sure he was right about. He's been proven right. And political criticism, this guy is saying that the president needs to worry about political criticism. For the love of God, man, what does he get beyond political criticism? It doesn't matter what the president says. I mean, the one thing I had a friend of mine talk about some kind of new potential drug or vaccine on the market and that he'd been researching. I don't remember the name. It doesn't really matter. It wasn't the malaria drug, but he was talking about if this thing works, it's going to be revolutionary. And I told him, well, I said, I hope President Trump doesn't find out about it. And he said, why is that? I said, because if it has hope in it and President Trump mentions it, well, they're going to poo-poo it and deny the thing to people automatically, man. But let's get on with this part here. It said that the White House urges, this is the same anonymous Republican, by the way. If the White House urges governors and mayors to reopen businesses and schools, nudges Americans, I guess, is that the new handshake going to be doing? Like I heard it was feet kicking or something like that. Americans to return to work and urges people to freely move about again, the coronavirus is contained, though through either testing for the virus itself or testing individuals, these are long paragraphs, potentially immunity. Trump will almost certainly portray himself as a hero and the wartime president he wishes to be. Portray himself. If we get past this virus and we get back to work and the economy even comes a third of the way back to where it was before the election, President Trump shouldn't have to portray doodly squat. He will be seen as the winner and the wartime president because everybody knows we're at war. Sometimes we're at war with ourselves, though, right now, I think. Trump has said the White House will move ahead with reopening the economy even without the capacity to test every American for the virus. Roughly 328 million people live in the U.S., with only 2 million coronavirus tests complete as of Friday. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this testing. And no, I'm not an expert on testing. I'm not a doctor. I ain't played one on TV. I'm just a good old boy who's seen one or two things and could come to, as Spock would say on Star Trek, logical conclusions. This testing deal is way, way overrated, in my opinion. Now, here's the deal. I'm not saying don't test people, but the idea that we can just routinely test 325 or more million people on any kind of general testing basis is ludicrous. It's not going to happen. If we're waiting for that day, and you can blame it on whoever you want, I blame it on the fact that we got, pushing 400 million people, and the world is in billions and billions of people, and they all need testing. So the idea that we got to wait until we got to be able to test everybody is crazy. It isn't going to happen. So if you're waiting on that, you might as well wait on the ancient aliens to come back if they're not here already, because it ain't going to happen. And here's the way it's got to be. And testing. Get back to testing. I don't have a problem with testing people. I think right now, until we get a better test, a more reliable, I won't say reliable, but quicker reliable test, then we're going to have to maintain testing people that are showing symptoms. There's more people in that sense, I guess, than we have tests. So we got to test that. We're going to have to isolate some people. Some people aren't going to show symptoms. We're never going to be able to test, if you believe the numbers, on a routine basis, unless we have a breakthrough in technology, which is always possible. We're never going to be able to test all these people that aren't showing symptoms. Some people say it's like 70 or 80% of the people that may be infected. At the end of the day, and I keep repeating it, but if I say it bears repeating, we're going to have to assume some risk. Life is a risk. It just is. Maybe more now. I don't know. Is it more risky now than it was 100 years ago? I mean, we're worried about people dying in their 80s, and I'm all for worrying about that. But it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have anybody in their 80s. The life expectancy not that long ago in the United States was about 45. I mean, at the time of founding of our nation, it was only about 35 years old. I mean, and that we're living in more troubling times than people who lived through World War I and II and the Civil War here in this country, that somehow we're the ones that are more threatened than ever. It's crazy. It's selfish and self-centered, which is something we've become quite good at. Dr. Tony, if you can tell, I'm a little bit irritated by it, man. Dr. Tony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, Dr. Doom as some call him, and a member of the White House Corona Task Force, said last week that the benchmarks might not be consistent across the country since each area faces different challenges. I keep hearing this thing, we got to have a national policy. No, we don't. We don't have to have a one-size-fits-all policy. There's a difference between living in New York City and where I live in Hawthorne, Florida. There always has been, there always will be. I'm not saying one is more important than the other, and I'm not downplaying certainly what's happening in New York. I love New York. Just like the sticker said, I lived and worked up there for almost 5 years in the mid 80s when I was a young guy. I love New York City. I do. But, I was happy, joyous, and free at the time, and no kids, no wife, nothing, making a pot full of money. What wasn't there to love, right? But one size fits all has always been ridiculous. It just is. It would not, I guess this is Dr. Fauci, yes. I would not want to pull back at all in New York until I was clear that the curve really was doing what we've seen in other countries, a very steep decline. And he said, and we had the capability, if there was a resurgence, of having everything in place to be able to do containment as opposed to struggling with mitigation with what we've been doing. I don't disagree with that. New York is a special case. New York was always more potentially damaged by something like this. I mean, first of all, it's just a target. It generally is. So the idea that we weren't prepared for some type of viral, it could have been, we worried about dirty bombs and everything else, right? New York City was hit on 9/11 for a reason. It is a target. Then you got people stacked up living on top of each other. It's one of the most densely populated, it's probably the most densely populated area in the United States and one of them in the world. It's primed for this type of stuff. They should have been more ready than Des Moines, Iowa. I mean, that's just the way it is. And let me just get to this part, because this, among other things that irritates me, this irritates me. The way we talk about China in the media, like somehow they've been doing a better job than us. Oh, and the president of China has been doing a better job. World Health Organization, which in the pocket of China. We did a whole show on that. I believe it was Friday. Check it out. It's just ridiculous. You know what would happen? And this idea that President Trump is a fascist. President Trump's a fascist president. He's a Nazi. And all that kind of crap. The idea that people now that have been calling him that want him to actually become that and nationalize business and everything else and lock down and do everything else. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Really, get honest with yourself. What would China do with New York City if it were in China? What did they do with the Weiyun? What did they do there? They literally locked people. You don't have to take my word for it. Look it up yourself. They didn't just tell people to stay at home. They literally had apartment buildings where they welded the doors shut. There's a difference between a communist lockdown and the United States of America lockdown. I mean, get real. LeBron James don't know nothing about. He's a world traveler and a multi-millionaire. And yeah, he loves China because he loves the bling bling. I get it. I understand it. But don't sit here and tell me that you know anything about freedom of speech when that's exactly what you got here. And they're literally harvesting organs from people in China. They're locking people up in concentration camps, and they welded the door shut on people. To compare us to China and call yourself an intelligent human being is about as an oxymoron as there could possibly be. Fauci said on Thursday, White House briefing, that's different than a relatively smaller city, talking about New York, town, or whatever you have in the Midwest or mountain regions, which is generally very well controlled. I'm going to tell you something really radical. I got a radical idea. Why don't we follow the U.S. Constitution? You ever thought about that as a possible solution? I know some of you out there go, well, that's shocking. It's shocking. If we actually, one of the reasons why we're not as prepared as we could be is because we're all depending on the bloated federal government. They can't even run the post office, for God's sakes. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's not a knock on the men and women of the post office, but we can't even run the post office. And we're talking about having some kind of national plan. Here's my radical idea on why I mentioned the Constitution. What if the states had their own plan? What if they had their own preparation? Because the federal government was never intended to be this big umbrella of safety other than defending the nation. And when President Trump tries to defend the nation, like build the wall, which he was right about then and more right about now, he's called everything but a child of God. Why don't President Trump say, okay, we're going and use the best science. I'm not opposed to that, but say, look, we're going to lift this federal idea of a stay at home and shelter. And we're going to let the states, just be honest with people about what the risk is. We're going to let your state governors and your legislatures decide what is right for your state. But we're going to open up the economy of the United States of America. Some states may want to shut it down. I mean, I give you an example. Does the people, and I love, if you've heard me chime in at all, I love Louisiana. If I wasn't living and born and raised in Florida, I might move to Louisiana. I really like that state. But can you imagine if President Trump had said, like, what was Mardi Gras week started like Valentine's Day, the middle of February? If President Trump would have come in and go, we're shutting it all down right now. Oh my God. They would have said that he was being Hitler-esque. Would they not? The mayor of New Orleans. But now it's Trump's response. He should have shut down Mardi Gras. Nay, no way that would have happened. Let the states get their own courage back. You governors out there, and some of you are doing well. Be responsible for your own state and making the decision of when to open it up. Don't let Dr. Fauci decide. We got to have more John Glenn's, man. I'm telling you. We got to have the right stuff. I mean, think about that. Chuck Yeager strapping himself or John Glenn getting in that dadgum rocket ship. Have you seen what the first Saturn rockets really were about? Have you seen what they were really about? Crash landing in the ocean, man. And we're challenged? I mean, come on. But Judd Deere, the deputy White House press secretary, said in a statement on Sunday, President Trump's policies took this economy to record-setting historic highs for all Americans, but this unforeseen, unprecedented crisis has hurt many workers and businesses. And you know what I say to that? Amen. Thank God. Can you imagine how much harder we'd be having it right now if we had not been going gangbusters for the last 3 years? If President Trump had not got this economy turned around to probably the best one we've ever had, where would we be if we were starting at the bottom like when he started as president? Where would we be right now? And by the way, who is best suited if we ever get out of this mess to bring us back? I think Donald Trump would be high on that list. I know that Joe Biden wouldn't be. I had one friend of mine talking about Joe Biden. I'm gonna get behind the wheel of Joe Biden. Man, get real. I was going to say this later, but I'll say it now, maybe again later. Would you even get in the car? All seriousness, I put this on his Facebook thing. Would you actually get in the car with Joe Biden? Forget politics. Would you let Joe Biden drive your family 200 miles down the road? I can tell you in the state of Florida, Joe Biden would have a very difficult time getting a driver's license right now. I'm just telling you. But yeah, he's ready for the White House. The president wants to see, this is Mr. Deere said again, the president wants to see this economy open up again so people can get back to work. But the scientific data will drive the timeline on those decisions because his number one priority is to protect the safety and well-being of the American people. Sounds balanced to me. Here's let me just close this story out. I went a little longer than I expected on it, but it's important stuff. To me it is anyway. I hope it is to you. We got to have a balanced approach. These are my words. We got to assess our own risk. I said that earlier. I think enough said on that. Here's what concerns me. It's been relatively calm so far, at least in my area. I know I live in a more rural area, but I've been watching the news. It's generally speaking been relatively calm. I think some of that is people don't know exactly what to do. I also think that a virus is a unique natural disaster in the sense that everybody's a little bit sprayed, even the hooks and crooks, right? So the thing is existence really our only goal? Just living, just actually breathing. And now don't get me wrong, it's important to be breathing. I want to keep living. But at the end of the day, is existence all that it's about? I've been binge watching this weekend, probably shouldn't. Maybe that's why it's got me all boogered up here. I've been watching The Walking Dead, binge watching it, man. And I had not seen that show before. I'm kind of glad I didn't. I got something to watch now. But it's interesting how people respond to calamity. Now, is it bad as it is now? No. Could it be? Maybe so. But I keep repeating these two founding fathers, and I'm just really hooked on them right now. I think their words of wisdom are big for us. Show Ben Franklin. In case you hadn't tuned in, this is a mantra of mine. The people willing to trade freedom for security will receive neither. So if we just want to be at peace and safe and sound, we're going to lose freedom. We're going to give up our freedom for that security. We're going to lose it. And then my good friend, Patrick Henry. Man, do we need some more Patrick Henrys in this day and time. You know, it's so interesting. A friend of mine pointed this out after I've been talking about Patrick Henry, that he was very vocal through the revolution, but after, not so much. And he probably was. But you know, I have a feeling about that because he was speaking the truth. And once the war was won, we didn't need the truth as much as we did then. But Patrick Henry, read that quote. I won't repeat it for you. But basically what he's saying there when he talks about give me liberty or give me death is just being alive. It ain't enough. It ain't enough. It never has been enough for American people. That's why we have the greatest country in the history of this planet. Because for American people, simply being alive has never, ever been enough. Is it now? I don't think so yet, but we are moving that way. All right, we're going to move along here to a Bloomberg story, and it's an update on what we've been telling you about the energy industry, especially our independence and how it's slipping away and all of that kind of stuff. So I want to update you quickly on that. Oil price war ends with historic OPEC and deal to slash output. The world's top oil producers pulled off a historic deal. The deal, I wonder who was behind the deal, I imagine, to cut global petroleum output by nearly a tenth, putting an end to the devastating price war that brought the energy industry to its knees. Donald Trump has been leading the way on this because he understands. He's not a head in the sand, pie in the sky. He's a realist, and he understands that our energy sector, so goes the energy sector, so goes the greatness of America, and he understands that. After a week-long marathon of bilateral calls and video conference ministers from OPEC Alliance and the group of 20 nations, an agreement finally emerged to tackle the impact of the pandemic on oil demand. Basically, it's real simple. When the economy is diving or low, we don't use as much oil or energy in general. When the economy's booming, we use a lot more. So that's one of it. Also, OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia and some other oil producers, including Russia, were trying to fix the market to put our business, our national energy, out of business so that when the economy came back, they could control the price of oil. Where would we be right then? So we don't want that to happen. President Trump is trying to save our energy industry. The talks had almost fallen apart late last week amid resistance from Mexico, but came back from the brink after a weekend, and I can't even believe that Bloomberg is reporting this, after a weekend of urgent diplomacy, President Trump intervened, helping broker the final promise, or final compromise. I'm sorry. It's unbelievable that they gave him credit. I love this part right here. This is a guy named Ed Morris, a veteran oil watcher, said, unprecedented measures for unprecedented times. Unprecedented and historical discussions of production cuts. The U.S. played a critical role. The U.S. in this case is Donald Trump, in brokering between Saudi Arabia and Russia for the new OPEC Plus Accord. Unprecedented. Now, they've been talking about Donald Trump as being unpresidential. They've been talking about Donald Trump as being unhinged. Now, I can't wait when he wins in 2020 and becomes unleashed. I can't wait for unleashed Donald Trump. But unprecedented, they're giving him Trump. Now, Trump had a meeting, by the way, I think it was last week, with he called a meeting with energy experts and energy leaders, CEOs of all different types of energy, mostly fossil fuel, to the White House, and had a meet with his people about this because we got to save our energy. And the Democrats, what do? They demonize, literally ran a campaign against fossil fuels. Where would New York be right now if it wasn't for fossil fuels that fuel the trucks and the truck drivers, by the way, that are bringing it in? Isn't it ironic that it's not a college professor that's saving New York, but truck drivers and nurses, of course, doctors, and all that kind of stuff? I mean, salute to all of y'all. First responders at the top, truck drivers right there with them, train engineers as well. People that drive that, they don't get much credit either. The Democrats demonize all those people, but they're the ones saving America. You know why? The food lines are brought to you by socialism. If you want to see the contrast, socialism brings you food lines. Look, everywhere socialism is, you got lines. You know who makes it that there's something actually in the store when you get past the line? It's capitalism. I heard somebody talking about capitalism. Capitalism is the only chance we got to save our soul. This thing is not going to be invented. This cure is going to be invented, if there is one, by capitalism. Even if it's in China, they're going to try to make a profit on it. But right here it says that the biggest winner appears to be Trump, who refused to actively cut American oil production and personally brokered the deal over the phone calls with Mexican president, a Russian president, and the king of Saudi Arabia. Thank God he's kept those people friends. He don't have to be like inviting them over for dinner, but it's a good thing he kept them friends to try to work this out. Let me just say this in conclusion with this article, and we'll close here. Donald Trump is the right man at the right place at the right time. I firmly believe that. Well, we're about out of time. I want to, there's a Wall Street Journal article. I'm not going to cover it very deep. It's about Joe Biden's to-do list, about picking a running mate. One thing I'll say is, where's Obama right now? Now, by the time this show's over, maybe he's come out and endorsed him. Probably not. If he hadn't already, why hadn't he? I think he's not sure that Biden's actually going to be the nominee. And the bottom line of this, we're going to play this quick video for you. I've played it before, but I'm telling you right now, if you are thinking about voting for Joe Biden, then you should be forced while you're home sheltering. You should voluntarily, but if I was going to get the government to force anything, it would be this: to force you to tape your eyes shut, wake you up, and make you watch this video right here in a continuous loop if you're supporting Joe Biden.
I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun, and the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
You should have to watch that 24/7 if you're Joe Biden. But I want to speak as we go out to the people who support the president. You got to still campaign for the man via email, signs in yard, all that kind of stuff. Take nothing for granted, because the Democrat starts out with California, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York. It doesn't matter who it is, Creepy Joe or whoever, they're going to start out with that advantage no matter what. So we need to make sure that we don't let our guard down during this time. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.